Hey everybody, welcome to the fourth Ergoversary. I'm here with my man Alex. It's pretty crazy.
Uh,
4 years,
Happy anniversary, everyone.
4 years in. How you feeling about how everything is progressing?
Oh, yeah, it's actually very very good year it was in the first place. Very intense, also as usually.
Yeah, I think both internally there's been a ton of progress. We're seeing the emergence of DeFi. Applications are taking off, communities are maturing and kind of I don't know, growing into their own thing, which is great to see.
Yeah, actually, a lot of things. Yeah, a lot of new DeFi, a lot of core developments, a lot of talks about further uh, development of the core protocol, storage rent. Once it is getting to hit soon. Then also a lot of talks about power structures in the community, right? And new ones emerged, such as Sigma nodes. They will have a presentation during the summit.
That's awesome to see. I'm curious, in terms of this next year, yeah, we're gonna have roll into the storage rent period where UTXO start getting recycled back to miners, and that's gonna be interesting. That's hard to predict how that's going to lead to new potential mining-based DeFi. What are your thoughts rolling into the storage rent period?
I think many miners will realize finally some unique features of the protocol. Right, so that Ergo is not just another coin to jump in, mine for some time, and then jump for another recently launched coin with hype, right, and marketing buzz.
Yeah,
There are some unique features for miners as well.
yeah, that's one big topic moving into, let's say, a new year. The merge and all of the madness around that it's been a big change in the crypto space. I think that in terms of the actual security subsidy that proof of work coins are paying miners, right now there's still a lot to rebuild.
Still, it's pretty much open discussion in the Bitcoin community, for example. Kind of discussion I'm checking mostly outside of Argo, actually, these days. In Argo, it seems, it's kind of, more developed, right? So there is some plan, unlike Bitcoin community. For Bitcoin, it's currently about a lot of mess with some software proposals and so on. Some soft forks actually quite dirty, so not so soft.
Yeah, that's the truth. It's interesting to see. I mean, you can get the tail emission, but then you kind of have infinite or potentially infinite rewards, at least over a long enough duration of time. You can look at like what Ethereum is doing with, I don't know, some proof of stake mechanic that's burning token and enriching people that are kind of already staked to the network. I think that the recycling mechanism of ERG is quite fascinating. So I'm really looking forward to storage rent and seeing how that plays long term.
Yeah, and there are even some fans of Ergo coming for the storage chain component, like this now pretty famous in the chats Luis guy.
Yeah.
So he's using a monetary term demurrage, which is probably more precise, right?
No, I think that is a really good visual. Those of you that don't know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We avoided using the term demurrage because, it's not widely known, let's say.
Yeah, and it's kind of unique in the application of blockchain. You can look at it in like practice for like shipping, where you have a certain period where you need to handle your business in the port, and then you got to move because, well, taking up space there, hurts the flow of everybody, right? And so I guess if you look at state space as some kind of precious resource, yeah, you need to compress your UTXOs. You need to move, every 4 years. You need to do something, right? Otherwise, you just become stagnant and start to potentially stack up on a miner's hard drive somewhere.
Right, and yeah, so well, in general, for commodities, you need to pay, right? So if you have well, gold bullion in a vault, then you need to pay, right?
Yep.
For storing it in the
It's
vault.
it's an interesting economic primitive that once things start to recycle, right? I'm very curious to see, number one, how that affects like the longer term value of certain things, right? There are certain assets that probably will, I don't know, just be deleted. Some will be recycled, and you'll have some strange like secondary market come to play potentially.
Yeah, who knows? And also, yeah, what's interesting is that this, well, monetary from one side and technical from another, well, component of the protocol is also interacting nicely with other parts of the protocol. For example, scalability solutions, such as different pruning solutions we have.
Yeah.
Right, such as supports for UTXO set commitments, which is allowing for, well, what's called SnapSync in the Ethereum community, so bootstrapping with UTXO set snapshot, with, well, stateless clients we have, and so on. So, well, the point is, well, with time, we can expect clients to prune more and more of data once blocks are becoming bigger and bigger. And then, yeah, well, with this storage and components, you don't have UTXOs older than 4 years, right? Means
Fascinating to think.
yeah, if all the clients are removing blocks older than 4 years, so still it's not so problematic to the network. Right, and yeah, for other networks, it's actually, well, kind of very open question. Well, how much can you prune?
Yeah.
Without, well, introducing problems to some network agents, at least.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating to think about. I'm not sure how a lot of other projects are going to tackle that solution, but it is quite interesting to think that at some point the oldest UTXO will be within that storage ramp period, and that is really fascinating in terms of scanning the chain, pulling data from the chain, and if it's something that potentially you need the entire state from Genesis, that can be a lot of space. And what do you save, what do you not?
Yeah. And yeah, so here you can scan just last 4 years, right? And all the data is there.
Yeah, fascinating.
Well, you need to scan from Genesis if you want to, well, save historical data, right? For some reason, for maybe blockchain analysis and so on. But for, well, working applications and wallets, that's not needed anymore. So yeah, that's a very different story, and yeah, actually, it's quite interesting how well technical and monetary aspects of the protocol well upgraded. Actually,
Yeah, most people tend to look at scalability just in terms of speed, right? And not necessarily ever growing data. How do you work with that efficiently over time?
yeah, so people are, well, usually asking just about one metric, right? So TPS, which doesn't make sense. I mean, so you're gonna have a lot of TPS, but after well, 10 million blocks, well, what will you do with a bloated blockchain?
Yeah, people forget.
Yeah.
About the infrastructure that surrounds a blockchain. It's working to call it, read it, scan it, pull information, and make things work.
Yeah, so I will make a video for the summit. Yeah, and another video is about the Dexia stablecoin protocol. There will be another stablecoin video from Bruno and so on. Maybe you can share some announcements also.
Sure. We were kind of working towards, let's say, the next iteration of AgeUSD. So, that protocol has been picked up by, I believe, Jed. I think Melkomita made one. There's at least a potential Monero fork that's going to try to do some private implementation of.
Zephyr.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I like the idea of private stable value. That's a fascinating concept to think about. And so now Bruno's back at it again, and he's coming forward with a new protocol that's kind of the second iteration based on the learning progress, pros and cons of AgeUSD. So I'm sure he's going to have a great presentation here in a bit. I know one thing that a lot of people are looking forward to learning about. It's been popping up in the chats quite a bit, is potential scaling solutions on top of Ergo. I know that, in my opinion, a lot of the times it's this marketing sex appeal, scaling versus like actual economic demand and use for the blockchain. But I think Ergo has a lot of great flexible tools, and looking at Arc as an example, it's coming out on Bitcoin. Be interesting to I guess discuss what do you see in terms of the future of scaling on top of Ergo.
All right. So, in the first place, on layer 1 to find popular Brink solutions, right, which are also safe. For layer 0, so peer-to-peer network, actually a lot of optimizations possible, right? And after bootstrapping with Nepopos, that's the next focus, basically. For layer 2, a lot of designs, but application specific. So I think maybe to consider chain cache as example, right? And find some layer 2 design, maybe make even some prototype implementation in coming months. Things like coin pools, Arc, and so on, are quite interesting and seems doable. For other applications, maybe Hydra is a better choice. So it really depends. Actually, it would be interesting to consider applications, right, which do have need for layer 2 solutions.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe Oracle pools. So for the gold Oracle pool, for the mainnet, for Dexia, and the next iteration of SegUSD, which will be SEG Gold. Right, so I'm thinking about larger pool, maybe 20 to 30 participants. Then maybe layer 2 can be considered, but maybe not in observable future, because still it's not about high load, right? So it's not about tens of thousands of transactions per day. So still it's about just a few hundred.
Yeah, it's more of an experiment. It's what I've been saying. There's a ton of talk in terms of scalability, but then you have to ask the question: is there the demand there to really make economic? Right?
So for the Oracle pool, probably Hydra would be a good solution, right? Because participant set is known. Even more, it's pretty fixed, right? And then it's then kind of low hanging fruit for Hydra.
Yeah, and I think that as as we bootstrap multiple Oracle points, it probably will make more and more sense over time.
Right. But there should be some motivation for that, right?
Mhm.
Demand, natural demand for layer 2 solutions is coming from blockchain congestion.
Mhm.
Actually, it's not coming from just
Marketing.
desire to do layer 2 for the layer 2 sake.
Yeah, we can
Uh,
market then, buddy.
in case of Ethereum, it's understandable, right? So, the network started to experience network congestions back in late 2017 with CryptoKitties, all that crap.
Yeah.
Then VCs bought a lot of layer 2 ideas. Even starting from that time, from 2018.
And here we are.
And still, there are few solutions and different trade-offs, right? There is no perfect solution, and still, in most cases, users are using layer 1, despite the crazy fees and so on.
Yeah.
So layer 2, it's technically cleaner, right? Than in regards with other aspects where adoption could be quite low, actually,
Mhm.
even in case of blockchain congestion. And for Lightning Network, right, it's still kind of early days.
Yeah, no, very,
Uh,
very much so. I mean, if you look,
so still not very popular tools, right? Lightning based, I mean.
no, but it's an interesting question long term. How to fill that demand when there is congestion, and
Oh,
there's a lot of different approaches. I don't see any universal answer or one size fits.
yeah, I mean, there are a lot of solutions, but we need to see the problem.
Yeah, no, always. No, it's an exciting year. I know that it would be nice to see some more applications using Sigma protocols long term. I'm excited to see the emergence of DeFi and watch that space for the next year. It's a big point of growth on the network. There's a lot of applications and developers out there that are building tools that in aggregate going to really change what's possible on top of Ergo.
Yeah, so I'm waiting for Paideia with impatience. Actually, have some use cases.
Yeah.
Mayo, very personal once again.
Sure.
We're waiting for Paideia, and a lot of good stuff is coming.
Yeah, so we'll have to give Louis Vatra a hard time. When Paideia, we're waiting impatiently.
All right. So, do you want to discuss any other videos which will be presented?
I think that as we go through the list, on the day of, I think it'd be great to get some commentary, and hopefully these are recyclable. That's one benefit of like making the type of content on YouTube versus like Twitter Space. They just get buried. So who knows? Maybe someone in the future, year 5, year 7, year 8, will come back and watch these Ergoversary videos and be able to kind of track and watch the growth of the ecosystem. It's been a fun thing to be a part of.
Yeah. So we still have the first Ergo Summit. So I will watch it definitely later someday.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have that just, for historical purposes, reuse it. See where the
Yeah,
market's
yeah.
there's crypto is always kind of a mad space to be in, You've been around for a while.
Yes, actually, well, every year he has like 10 years, right? In, well, any other place. Yeah, I don't know about AI. Maybe it's also quite crazy these days.
Yeah,
But yeah, blockchain also. And yeah, it's crazy for many years in a row.
yeah. Well, it's good that you're keeping your sanity through it all, my friend. That's what's important.
Uh, yeah, that's sometimes pretty hard actually.
Yeah. Me, sometimes I just gotta go outside, forget about it for a minute.
Right, yeah. Um, all right. So, well, do you have any predictions for the fifth anniversary?
Ooh, for the fifth anniversary, where will we be? That's hard to say. That's hard to say. I think that, like, if I had to just sit back and say, okay, what's a net prediction? I think that we're going to see a lot more DeFi primitives over the probably next year, and hopefully that matures both in terms of functionality. I know that there's a couple projects that are really focused on improving the user experience, and my hope is that long term, uh, let's say on the user side, it becomes easier to host actually your own infrastructure, right? There's a lot of discussion in the crypto space, like, yeah, run your own node, right? But there's also
Mhm.
infrastructure that works around the state history that it would be really really cool if we could package that in a light way where people could have a little bit more power over the actual infrastructure that they're using around the node to transverse the ecosystem. So I hope that that evolves in parallel with DeFi, just because it makes the network a lot more resilient, secure, and gives people, best assumptions.
Yeah, true. And yeah, so also more governance primitives,
Yeah,
right? It seems because of multi-sig support in UpKit and Paideia
yeah,
and so on.
yeah. It's putting things on chain where they're transparent. I really hope that leads to better governance in projects. Sometimes in the crypto space, people raise a lot of money and then they just kind of disappear, right? Magic trick. How do they evaporate things that fast? I have no idea. But having things on chain, public, enforceable by multi sig is going to be really fascinating in terms of project management long term. Could even change the EF. That would be cool to see.
Yeah, so they'll control treasuries actually. Well, quite an interesting thing. And yeah, so well, probably we'll try personally some things in well next year.
Yeah.
Actually, some experiments already going on. Like one with those guys in Kenya.
Mhm.
Right. So, well, on loan repayments, right? So, still, it's open question how to control the funds and what to do with them.
Yeah.
Maybe provide new loans or, well, whatever.
Well,
Right.
it's needed to force maturity, and I think that Paideia specifically, that's one thing that really it is going to highlight is we go uh, take things that oftentimes are in the shadows, and put them in a public square, and then let people potentially collaborate and build value, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah, in regards with rewarding creators, so yeah, considering some things for the DEX and yeah, upcoming SIG Gold, right? So, yeah, we will share some details over the summit.
Awesome. Well, I know I'm looking.
Uh, yeah, and well, it's always about well experimentation still, right? So, well, finding some proper balance to well reward developers, right?
Mhm.
Because well they're always asking
Yeah.
about well, how will they get compensated, right?
I'm a
Which is a
fan of
quite natural question after all.
natural question. I think the headless framework, looking at something like Signify, having some use-based percentage going to the person that wrote the backend makes a lot of sense. I hope we see more.
Yeah, yeah, but that's just one aspect, right? So, well, about business model, right, of development backend apps. But then, yeah, so in regards with protocols development, so yeah, I'm thinking about using, well, already known primitives such as emission contracts, maybe, right, to reward developers instead of wasting contracts, and maybe job controlled emission, right?
Oh, that's a great idea.
Uh, yeah, something like that. Let's see.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. There's a ton of I don't want to say early dumpage in the crypto space, but there's a lot of teams that, they get rewards faster than the emissions to the public, and it's not
Yeah,
always.
so it's always not balanced, right? So before crypto, it was the case when VCs actually ripped off, right? Developers,
Mhm.
startups, a lot of cases, non-cases, and yeah, now it's the teams, right, who are getting paid upfront and
Yeah.
getting millions upfront, which is also not good, right?
Yeah.
That's another extreme point.
No,
So yeah,
so
the question is to find the proper balance.
that's a pain point in this industry. It's not an extreme point. I think there's a ton of people in the last cycle that participated in different applications where the team got money up front. They inherited all of the risk, and yeah, that's how the story went. So it's really fascinating to look at potential tools that not only can lead to better management, but also I don't know, the better assumptions in terms of fairness and distribution. Which used to be a really, really popular topic in crypto, but somehow that really disappeared over the years.
Yeah, so risks should be shared, I believe, along with profits.
Mhm.
The question is to find some working models.
No, that's sometimes a little bit of trial and error, but at least we have the tools to potentially do that.
Yeah.
So exciting stuff. I think that all of that, moves the needle, I guess, in the right direction in terms of what crypto should be about and what people should, expect in terms of P2P, kind of joint collaborative economies, right?
Yeah. And yeah, so for privacy and cryptographic protocols as applications. So yeah, I also think we will see some developments. Multi-sig support is coming, right? There was recent tutorial on Sigma protocols for developers, and yeah, Stealth addresses support is coming in the next Ergo Mixer release, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Had a chat with Anon 2020 recently, actually, about that. Yeah, seems a lot of developments would be good to find maybe some incentivization for liquidity provision for the mixing. But
No,
yeah, let's see.
that's
It's
always been
still
an interesting pain point, in my opinion.
yeah,
How do you?
it's still an open question.
Yeah, it's still an open question. I mean, is it outsourceable? Do you try to? Um, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what the best primitive to do that is and still maintain privacy. But it's a really good question long term because that is a tool. If you do it right, it can change everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and then for layer two, well, actually, in addition to Oracle pools, maybe Rosen could be a good candidate for being powered by Hydra.
Yeah,
So being on layer two with Hydra. But yeah, let's see. So we need to see it's working on layer one
yeah,
first.
got to mature a little bit first, but that's a good long-term goal.
Yeah, so well, I'm thinking that's yeah, actually at some point maybe well, some recommendations could be given to developers, like if there is, for example, well, fixed set of participants, right, which are well submitting data points basically, right, well, towards well completion.
Mhm.
When quorum is reached, then yeah, it looks like a good candidate for Hydra. Well, for other applications, well, we can also find some principles
Yeah,
and
I,
provide guidance.
I hope one of these years we get an Hydra cookbook for Ergo, you know?
Yeah, but yes, still, well, layer one is underutilized.
Sure.
So
Sure, you gotta, I think that once the demand is there, then it's time to really start seriously approaching, what makes sense where. But, it's always hard to predict, where demand comes from, right?
yeah, exactly.
Looking at Ethereum back in the day, I would not have guessed crypto kitties.
Right.
Looking at Bitcoin and the ordinal stuff, didn't see that coming. But well, I guess it's a matter of product market fit and what the people decide, right?
Yeah, so it's hard to predict actually what will be popular in 2 years, let's say.
Let's see.
No one can say.
No, but it's an exciting space. It's 20 years in crypto time. Let's see, buddy.
Yeah, and yeah, so another thing to talk about, I guess, is that yeah, just like 10 days after the summit, it will be another emission reduction.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which will be relatively bigger than all the previous ones, and actually every next reduction will be bigger than previous, right? And the last reduction would be halving essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, and well, for the next year we'll have about 4 reductions, right?
We're starting to go off that cliff, and it's really fascinating to see how, you have that slowing of the emission period, and we also have a transition towards like the longer term uh, storage rent stability protocol. It's going to be fascinating to watch and be a part of that.
Yeah, but also yeah, well, less new liquidity, right? So means, well, the redistribution of old probably more active, and yeah, also well, with the new DeFi protocols, also TVL will go up and up, right? It's already going up all the time basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, slowly now, right? But yeah, with slower emission and increased TVL growth rate. So yeah, it would be a pretty interesting game, right?
No,
So
very much so, especially as we have, a lot of DeFi primitives growing in parallel. Um, you know, and it's going to be a fascinating time to watch. I'm excited to be a part of this space.
yeah, so let's see. So probably a lot of interesting developments.
Yeah.
We can well predict, but not in details, right?
Yeah, not in details. I mean, I don't know the future. It's not a crystal
Right.
behind me, buddy. That's a candle.
Yeah, but the direction is known. So, the emission will reduce, right?
Yeah.
And TVL will go up,
No, in,
likely. So then, yeah, with storage trend and so on. So a lot of interesting games. In this economy, let's see. How it
yeah,
goes.
the coolest thing about the Ergo ecosystem is, since the first Ergoversary, it has really grown to the point where we can't even track everything, right? I'm not the expert anymore in terms of what's going on in the ecosystem because
Yeah, me too, actually.
it's outgrown me. And so a lot of the DeFi primitives and protocols that are coming out in projects and teams, they're born from the ecosystem. They're taking over in terms of where people are looking and what people are doing. It's great to see.
Yeah, and actually, with storage rent, hopefully, more miners will come to the community, right? So to develop and get to understand the things, maybe to invest, right, and so on. So, well, actually, miners built a lot already.
Yeah, they did. We've had a great mining community. In the macro sense, it's been painful. Post merge, right? Does seem like markets exchanges have not really been so favorable in terms of GPU proof of work, but I think there's some very, very good reasons for it to exist, and hopefully that shifts.
Yeah, so the mining industry is still shrinking, right? With Flypool, for example,
Mhm.
uh, will be shut down soon, right? In coming days, basically.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I'm excited for the potential of Lethos anyway. I think that is probably going to be one of the more interesting things I hope that we see
yeah,
by the next Ergoversary is a major competitor to the standard Stratum mining.
yeah, yeah, and if Ergo can get some kind of unique mining industry, that would be quite huge, right?
Yeah, yeah, that would be huge.
I mean, some dedicated industry, even relatively small in size, but yeah, it would be huge, right, for starters.
Yeah, yeah, you get a lot of weird economic primitives if you look at like the potential of what's possible on Ergo. If you get like you could potentially recycle a wrapped Bitcoin in time or part of one anyway with storage rent or all kinds of things that just aren't really possible anywhere else.
Yeah, true.
So I'm excited to see collectively the community smarter than me, smarter than you. They have a lot of good ideas out there. So I'm excited to see what comes. I think
Yeah. So let's watch.
every year I've tried to make predictions and every year I've been wrong because the
Yeah,
beauty.
sure, because it's collective work, right? After all, and the collective is very dynamic and growing,
Yeah.
and changing actually on the way.
That's a good thing in the net. I think that the Ergo community has done really well in terms of I don't know, carrying first principles, having open source code, understanding what crypto should be about. So I'm proud to be a part of this community.
Yeah, so very exciting times when developers actually from all our the world joining, right, and building something, then there is composability, right, in many cases coming for free basically.
Yeah.
uh and a lot of experimentation, so a lot of funny stuff, sometimes weird even,
Yeah.
like this degen finance experiments, but yeah, I mean, why not?
Why not? It's crypto, baby. Have fun, but yeah, manage your risk and don't overexpose yourself, right?
Right. So yeah, there will be some fun Degen Finance videos, as far as I know.
Oh, good to hear. I'm looking forward to reading it or watching all of it. I haven't even caught up with all the schedule of everybody that's going to post, so I'll be there on the Ergoversary watching videos alongside everybody else.
All right. So yeah,
I hope.
waiting for it with impatience also.
Well, I hope everybody enjoys all the videos to come. The Ergo community is pretty diverse. We've got a lot of great teams, great people across the ecosystem. Tune in and have fun.
Yeah, and have a happy anniversary, and see ya next time.